Hello and welcome. I am Cyril Stover. Nigerian professionals are coming up with suggestions on how government can address the numerous demands of citizens and ease the cash squeeze. Now, along with domestic challenges, global events have also exposed the Nigerian economy to shocks. Today, I sit with a Nigerian professional as we examine the way out of the maze the country finds itself in. Our discussion will touch on numerous ways of managing human and material resources for sustainable growth. My guest is a certified financial education instructor with extensive experience in capital market operations, asset management, and occupational pension services. Kalu Aja holds an MBA from the University of Nigeria, Nsukka, and is an alumnus of the Lagos Business School, member of the Association of Financial Counseling and Planning Education, as well as an alumnus of the West African Capital Market School and the New York Institute of Finance. He is the author of a book, Let's Talk About Your Money. He joins me from Washington in the United States of America. Kalu Aja, welcome to One on One.
Thank you, Cyril. Great to be here.
Right. I'd like to start off on, understanding money. You say money needs to be understood, and I find that interesting and intriguing. And how do you understand money?
Well, you want to study it so you can get a grasp of it, right? So money is really time. The more money you have, then the more time you have. So if you are poor, you have the poverty of time, not really of cash. And what money does is allows you to do other things. So if you have money, you can pay for people to do other should we say, high-value tasks, free you up to do high-value, high-return tasks. That's the first thing about money. When you respect it, it comes to you, you take care of it, it grows, right? So if you understand how it works, what attracts it, then you're in a better position to then bring it to you and, of course, to use it.
So let's talk a bit more about money. Using the title of your book, Let's Talk About Your Money. In this case, the individual makes money, if you like, but the life and the living of the individual, at most times, reflects the environment in which the citizen is in, and in this case, Nigeria. How can a Nigerian make money, so to speak, manage money, and yet be in a country that has huge financial difficulties? Is that possible?
Yes, and I prefer to look at it this way. If you do not have knowledge of money, then even the little that you make in Nigeria, you would lose true enough understanding what inflation is, right? So look at it this way. If you had 100,000 naira and you put that money in the bank, right, and the bank paid you 4%, you're already losing money. If inflation is 19%, if you bought equity, if you bought stocks with the money, and you had a long duration to invest, right, and you basically rolled over and you compounded your dividends, you have a better chance of beating inflation and having what we call a real rate of return. So this is the thing about money. If you understand how it operates, how it multiplies, that's how you apply it. Financial literacy in Nigeria is very, very low. The report I just saw on financial literacy as measured by the S&P, about 24% of Nigerians are financially literate. You compare that to about 65 in the West, almost 70 in Norway. So long way to go. we don't understand the basics, budgeting, credit, how to deploy and spend money and to pay down debt. So we have to get those very, very basics, not only to multiply money, but just to manage what you're already making. That's the whole idea.
Now, is this principle different for nations, countries? Is it different?
I don't think so. I put it this way: if you live in the United States, right, you have lots of options on what to do with money, where to invest, and how to make money. How they earn is different from if you say you live in Nigeria and you work for the month and you have very, very limited avenues to invest. So it's more difficult, I would say, if you live in the West to manage money because growth is limited. You can buy a house, for instance, and it will double in 2 years, and i.e. the price. That could happen in, say, in Nigeria because we have less stock. So just simply by scarcity, asset prices go up. So choices are more in the West, but that then creates this complexity in managing money. In Nigeria, not a lot of choices, but that lack of a choice reduces your ability to use the financial market to say hedge or to grow your wealth. So it's you win here and you lose here, either ways here.
All right, let me paint this picture and see what you have to say about it. This is Nigeria. Huge natural resources. In fact, everyone says almost too rich in natural resources. Yet, there is a challenge with harnessing those resources and translating them to finance, funds that can address the needs of the citizens. So, how does that work out? That of all the years of independence, what we keep talking about is the potential and not the realization of what we can do.
That's a great question, Cyril. If Nigeria was a person, right, Nigeria would be a 60-year-old guy approaching retirement with no savings, but has a lot of revenues. And we talk about this in the book over and over again, how you should deploy your income, how you want to make it passive and active. In Nigeria's case, right, you're blessed, like you said, with a lot of resources. Fossil fuel has gotten 2 or 3 booms in her lifetime, which meant that salaries were doubled, assets were doubled. She made a lot of money in a very, very short amount of time. The problem for Nigeria is that she never saved, she never invested, and she never calculated what she would need in her retirement. So now she's getting close to retirement. She has no savings. She has a lot of children need to go to school and she has to buy assets or like school supplies for them, and she has no savings. She has a credit card and she's using her credit card to feed. And now the income that she makes can't even pay down that credit card. But right now, everybody knows that if you're in that situation, you stop spending, you get a second job, and you start to reduce your expenses. But for Nigeria, we see her taking a second credit card, we see her expanding her spending. So digging the hole deeper. So if I had a chat with Nigeria, we would get her out of the situation. But it will cause a lot of pain, but it needs discipline and understanding the principles of money. There's no difference between a country and the person. It's all about the behavior, how you behave with your money, how you spend. I see this all the time. Nigeria has a spending problem, not really a revenue problem.
Okay, a spending problem. But if you look at there's so many sectors which are begging for attention, how do you now allocate resources which are now scarce? There was a time we were considered to have lots and lots of money, but now you do hear people say, look, we don't have that much anymore. So how do you allocate these resources to all those areas begging for attention?
That's a great question again, Cyril. So in economics, right, we have to do 1 + 1 is equals to 11, not 2. You've got to look for, amongst your choices, do a scale of preference, and you want to allocate funds to where it has the greater multiplier effect. So if you have $1 billion, should you pay for subsidized PMS, or should you invest in education or roads? That's the question I want to ask yourself. And the simple answer is, where will my $1 or my naira yield me more than two? It can't be simple mathematics. You've got to have that multiplier. If I build this road and farmers get access to take their goods to farm, can farmers get more revenues who they can use to train their kids to go to school? And the kids going to school will allow them to then get, should we say, have an opportunity in life, which then leads to taxes. So you've got to think second, third, fourth base when you want to spend money. The cost of the fuel subsidy is not the amount we are paying, but the amount that we're giving away by not building schools and hospitals across Nigeria. So it's again back to the personal finance topics. What is your income? Draw up a scale of preference and spend on what is absolutely necessary, but that has a multiplier effect. You can't spend on everything. What is not good to have, you drop it. You've got to believe that you are on a budget. Guys that are on a budget do not buy cheap fuel, do not import cheap fuel. They rather try to get a second job, cut down on expenses, hunker down, and try to grow their wealth. Yeah.
But then if I were to take up the matter with the example you've just given, subsidy for petrol, now that's a vexed matter here in Nigeria. And public thinking, because I'm going to be asking you, how do you place public thinking on issues such as this? Now, public thinking is, well, this is our resource. This is about the only thing we have. So, what's wrong in us enjoying what's God given? Now, I suppose that doesn't go well with economics, does it?
Yes, so there's nothing wrong with a subsidy. In the US, the farmers get subsidized to farm, right, and to produce cheap food. There's nothing wrong with the subsidy. The problem is that the subsidy is important. So if we had refineries work in Nigeria and we subsidize that PMS for Nigerians, that's fine. I mean, we're keeping that cost locally. It's being spent on the Nigerians that pay taxes, right? But once you import it, you're exporting the job. You're whipping the naira, and you're making Nigerians less and less wealthy. So double whammy. This is the problem with the subsidy, that we've allowed the refineries all go bad. Hence, we have to then import a product that we have in abundance in Nigeria. That's the tragedy. So it's not the subsidy, it's that we're importing that subsidy. That's the real economic damage. And it's the 4 trillion. The budget is about 6 trillion. It's a deficit budget. So it's a material sum to spend that amount of money on. How many Nigerians do you think have a car? We most there are buses, but how many Nigerians, if you did that measurement, have a car? The argument is trucks bring food with farms. Okay, so subsidize diesel or subsidize diesel for the factories. But is PMS worth 4 trillion in 2022? That's the question I want to think about.
Kalu, let me ask you this, because it borders on policies. And I always ask this. Which determines the direction? Is it the politics that creates the policies? Or is it the economy that determines the environment and what you do in politics?
So I read a top story once where the US president, it was George Bush, was asking the Chinese president, Hu Jintao, he said, what keeps you up at night? And Hu Jintao said, I have to create 25 million jobs every year just to keep the Chinese citizens happy. So the politics in China, this is a communist country, very, very tight controls. If they don't create jobs, they have a big problem. So whatever the politics is, the economy is what keeps the politics running. So you can have whatever name you want to call it, right? But if you don't create jobs, they're not going to be in office very long. That's just the reality. The jobs keep the politics running. You can have your politics and have a 10-year plan like the Chinese have, and that helps a lot. But what drives whatever political gains and the survival of every regime is jobs. People have got to feel that there's a future, and that's what jobs create. It gives you a future for yourself, and for your family.
In all of this, what role can the population? What's the effect of the population? What about Nigeria? About 200 plus million. There is a national census coming up next year, but for now, the figures that we so use would be somewhere in the region of 200 plus million citizens. Should that be an advantage or a drawback?
If you have 200 million in the marketplace and they're just looking at the goods, right? They're not really helping, they're not buying. But if you have just 1% of that just buying those goods, then you have a real market. So Nigeria has got 200 million people. How many, if you look at the economy today, it's all sachet, right? Sachet is we reduce the size so that people can afford it. We haven't increased wages for years. So that market in itself, I would say it's a potential advantage. Right now, it's a drag. You've got 10 million kids out of school. That's the population give about Belgium, not in school. There's a direct correlation to GDP and education. So unless you can convert 200 million people to become buying, consuming members of an economy, then you don't get the advantage of that. When was the last time you saw a large company coming here to sell goods that are like maybe priced or at middle class prices? What you find folks coming to do are like, so that's the word how I'll put it. You have that population has got to be productive, has got to be consuming, has got to have savings, and has got to invest. That's how you go to GDP. For now, we're not seeing that still. So I would say, in a way, I would term it a potential opportunity, not yet.
The world today is knowledge driven. And one of the sectors in which Nigeria has huge challenges would be in education. Strikes, unions in education, and the strikes, of course, are not limited to educational institutions. You have them across virtually every part of the economy. But I like to spend some more time on strikes in the education sector, where a situation where for 6 months plus, tertiary institutions, public owned tertiary institutions are shut down because not only are the academic staff on strike, all of the ancillary staff are also on strike. And if you're talking about a knowledge-driven economy, who are we imparting knowledge on? So the argument has been the academics should go back to school, but the academics say there are certain things that need to be fixed. And the argument continues. For someone who's talked about managing resources and prioritizing allocation, what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, that's a difficult situation Nigeria finds itself, where you have the university unions like pulling their workers away from the classrooms. So students are essentially stuck at home. No one is graduating, no one is being admitted, no exams are being taken. Like I said earlier, there's a direct correlation between education and GDP per capita. If you want to make a nation wealthy, you educate women in the rural areas, especially in Nigeria. That's how you start that process of killing extreme poverty. So in Nigeria's case, what has happened really is that I would say by 2009, the ASU, the unions, and the federal government had an agreement, right? The government was supposed to fund 1.5 trillion over 3 years, make a lot of ongoing investments in education in Nigeria for the tertiary. The education trust fund was converted to TET fund, which is only now going to be used for tertiary. That agreement has not been kept to by the federal government of Nigeria, right? They signed it, they did not keep up to it. So you could say ASU has the legal and moral, table to go on strike. But ASU on their own, I think, from the time that agreement was signed till now, that agreement, in my view, this is my opinion, is no longer workable. What was signed, I do not think it's possible that it can be implemented. And what they have right now, simply holding on to an agreement without a bill to appropriate. ASU is asking for 25% of the budget. asking for 50% of that 25 to go to only tertiary, in my view, is regressive, and I do not believe it can be implemented in 2022. I.e., to take 50% of the education budget to just tertiary. So I would like the federal government and us to have a real grown-up discussion. Both sides, in a way, have let the students down. What do we agree on? How can we move forward? What new options can we bring to the table that moves this ball forward? Right now, nothing is working, and that's the situation we find ourselves.
One of the big issues would be how to finance education, and there are arguments on both sides. There are those who think that with Nigeria's size, education should just be free at all levels and to be fully state financed. However, state actors say it's difficult to do that. There are other competing needs in the country, and that well, some point to a local saying that what you get for free you don't value. Now, how can a country like Nigeria rise up to financing education in such a manner that we can move from where we are now?
Yeah. So education all over the world cannot be done by just the government. It's a multi-funding approach of the parents, the government, and even the private sector. What has happened in Nigeria is over the years, the federal government has gotten dragged into primary and now tertiary education. They're not supposed to directly fund, i.e. the federal government shouldn't be paying salaries of workers in the federal university. They can give grants, endowments, they can give gifts, but to directly pay salaries is really an overreach by the government. This also was signed in 2009. Right now, a new model has got to change. We've got to look at education from when the kid is born right up to when you go to university, if you want to go to university. We have the retirement savings account run by the PFAs. We can have an education savings account. When a child is born, the government will say, we're going to seed that child with 100,000 naira if the child gets immunized. So the parents immunize the child, the government pays 100,000 naira into an ESN, education savings account. The parents can pay, the government can pay from when that child is born till when that child is 18 to go to university, right? It's in America, it's called 529 plans. You can have it set up in Nigeria. At the point of education, you already have a seed fund waiting for that child, and the child can use that to get into school. Other things we can do for education to say endowments, right? Right now, like it or not, argue or not, the federal government says they have no funds. Half year 2022, the Minister of Finance has told us that the funds to service the debt is now exceeded the revenues the government is going to generate, which means there's no funds. As we're saying we want money, why don't we introduce endowments? Why don't we pass a bill to say if you're a private sector company or an individual donates to university, you get a tax credit which is transferable. That means that I could donate $1 million to the University of Nigeria Soccer, and I get $1 million, maybe 500,000 naira tax credit that I can sell. I sell that tax credit to an importer. Using that tax credit to pay Nigerian customs bill. So UNN gets my donation, customs get their revenues, and the school is able to use those endowments to fund itself. Endowments are not brand new. That's not rocket science. It exists. We have to pull in the private sector into tertiary. The government has got to go back to focus on the building blocks, which is the primary and secondary. All across the world, the bulk of government spending goes to primary and secondary. UNICEF says if you spend more on education, i.e. the government, that spending is regressive. Guess which countries spend more on education? The poor countries. All the rich OECD countries all spend more on primary and secondary. So that structure has got to be fixed. The government has got to leave tertiary, give them the autonomy, give them the power of endowments to fund themselves, and the government should concentrate on UBE, the universal basic education, which is more important. That's my own suggestion.
There's one other aspect tied to all of this, and it's what is referred to in Nigeria as the craze for certificates as against knowledge. And a situation where people leave tertiary institutions and they hardly know what to do with themselves, but they have a paper that says they have had tertiary education. And it doesn't look as if there's any hurry to change from this. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it should be the universities or the private sector should tell the universities these are the kind of graduates we want. Give a good example. One of the largest sectors in Nigeria right now, largest by way of employment of people, is Nollywood, the entertainment and movie industry. It employs more people, nearly as much as the federal government, from the producers, the directors, the guys making the CDs, the guys in the advertisements, the makeup, the catering, the food, a lot of Nigerians. How many universities in Nigeria offer a course, not mass communication, directly related to Nollywood, maybe shooting, script writing, financing a movie? How many banks can you go to that have a specific, financing section for Nollywood? So the universities, the private sector of the universities, we want you to train people in this sector. So those guys go to university and there's a job waiting for them when they leave. Right now there's a disconnect between the private sector in Nigeria and the universities. There's no connection between what you learn in school and what you would do in real life. Where you see that connection happening now, look at IT. Lots of kids are no longer going to university to study BSc computing. They take courses online, they do certifications online, and they come out and they get a job, an international job. That's what Nigeria is losing out on. Everyone is going to Canada. You go, you read a certification, and you are hired. That shows that the economy of the private sector gives you a degree in quotes higher than what the university gave you. So the craze for paper, it shows the disconnect between the marketplace and the universities. The universities have got to work for the marketplace, not the other way around. You can't teach people, say, COBOL if the whole world is going to say Python. Those are programming languages. That connection is lost, and they either will put it back or the school just become ivory towers of,
When we started off, we said apart from domestic issues, there were global happenings which have impacted on the Nigerian economy. A couple of them, for instance, the world is trying so hard now to move away from fossil fuels, and of course the drop in the price of what earns Nigeria most of its revenues. And of course, in came a global pandemic, which also devastated many economies in the world. Even a country that has almost everything in place was brought almost to its knees by these global happenings. And of course, we all witnessed the war, the Ukraine-Russia war. And that also has affected so many things. How can a country like Nigeria, well, it's said that some countries can actually take advantage of this. How can a country like Nigeria look beyond this and make something out of the situation? Some have talked about supplying gas, which we have not developed to that level. Now the challenge with even bread, because wheat, the bulk of the wheat that we need comes in from that axis.
Yeah. I think I don't use the wrong word here. Before the war in Ukraine, NNPC, Nigerian natural gas, and all fossil fuels industries in the entire world were put on, quote unquote, a death watch. The West had said, those are dirty industries and we are going to take them out. We are not going to fund new development in oil and gas. So essentially, if nothing had happened, NNPC would have been in serious trouble, right? The biggest threat to NNPC is a lawsuit in America claiming that maybe the NNPC polluted the American market because we exported crude oil over there. So that was the warning that we took here. And the vice president went to Dubai and said, listen, you just can't tell everyone to stop doing fossil fuels. But no one listened to him. Then we had the war, and the war exposed that, listen, you simply can't take Russia off the table. You don't have any country that can cover that deficit if Russia goes up. So Nigeria should have taken the advantage of supplying crude oil and gas to Europe. We already do. If we simply ramped up what we were supplying, we would have had a bumper harvest. But come home to Nigeria, our output is down. The report I saw from Pegasus, onshore crude oil, 90% is stolen. Onshore crude oil. That is just amazing. So we failed to take advantage of the oil and gas bonanza from the shock in the supply in Russia and Ukraine. Let's go to food, right? We're doing this, we want to diversify the economy, and we always mention agriculture. We shut down the borders to try to boost local production in food. That hasn't worked because food inflation has just kept on going up, which was productivity have not kept pace with population. So with that opportunity that Nigeria could have supplied wheat to other African countries, Egypt, Lebanon, that couldn't get supplies from the Ukraine, we also missed that. So the opportunities are clear and apparent. Look at gold. Russia is a big gold exporter. There's gold in Zamfara. We haven't taken advantage of that. During COVID, when China and the US had a trade war, China was looking for new sources to get soybeans, cowpeas, and all that. We didn't take advantage. During COVID as well, we are next to America, right? Like it's shorter to go from say Lagos to say New York, and all the way to China. We could have manufactured masks and all that. We took a bit of it, but not really a lot. The point I'm making is Nigeria is missing opportunities. These are all teed up for us. We have the location, we have the English speakers, we have the knowledge base. But internally, we haven't developed a nation that can ramp up supply to take advantage because there's no power, things are expensive to produce in Nigeria, and there's inefficiency in terms of productivity. So we have to fix Nigeria to then allow ourselves to take advantage of all these opportunities that we have mentioned. That's the problem.
All right, taking it up from there, we certainly have to fix so many things. We'll take a short break here. When we return, there'll be more with Kalu Aja. Stay with us on One-on-One. Why should we be in a difficult situation financially?
Once upon a time we were rich, but we're not a rich country anymore.
Disaster management is everybody's business.
In all these times, the organization turned to Nigeria.
We would as much want to harness the capacity that is within us so that we see how we can become self-reliant.
1 month ended, and he said, we are increasing warning strike by 2 months. I mean, you are incubating madness.
Even if these are officials of government who have been told to go and enforce the law and they have gone against the law itself, they must be held accountable. One-on-One, Friday, 10:30 p.m. on NTA Network. Thanks for staying with us. I'm still here with my guest, Kalu Aja. Well, I'd like to go into one area that we can say it confounds most people, and that is the question of it's referred to locally as the dollarization of the Nigerian economy and just about everything. I mean, the currency in this country is the naira and kobo, but you do find a heavy reliance on so many things on the dollar, to the extent that you go to the local market one day and prices have gone up, and you hear that, oh well, it's because the dollar has gone up, and there's this consistent fall of the naira against the dollar. it seems as if it's the dollar that drives the Nigerian economy. How do you explain that?
Yeah, I think it's really to do with inflation, Cyril. If you hold naira in your hand, just hold that naira in your hand from, say, January, you would have lost 19%. You didn't do anything, just holding that naira in your hand. So if you're a trader, you always price your goods in terms of replacement. So if you bought a television for 10,000 to sell, you would sell that television, putting into cognizance how much you would buy a brand new one to replace what you just sold. So if inflation is going up and you expect inflation to go up, then you would have a higher price to it because you have to go buy it in dollars and then convert to naira. So the way people can escape the naira inflation is to hold a currency whose inflationary path is not as steep as the naira. Hence the dollar comes into play. So that television is still $100, maybe it's $105, So you hold dollar to avoid the inflation. That's what's going on really. If you remember the Great Fella song about the guy trying to buy a fan for 250 naira. He saved and saved and saved. He nearly bought the fan. Then government announced second tier. That second tier was a second tier foreign exchange market, and the guy couldn't buy the fan. But if you have a different currency, if you have diversified your portfolio to hold a different currency, then possibly the effect of that inflation doesn't hit you that much. That's what's going on. No one spends dollar in quotes. If you go to my village, you can hold the dollar, but if you want to buy cassava, you still have to change in naira. So people are saving their money in dollar because if you put the money in the bank, you get 4%, 5%, okay, 10%. But inflation is 19%, so there's a disincentive to save. So just hold the dollar paper. When you want to spend, convert to naira, spend, and take it back to dollar. That's what's going on.
But the value of the naira continues to fall, and despite so many interventions by the Central Bank of Nigeria, it would seem that you make some gains, and before you know it, you have reverted to the old situation. And it's thought that this is also contributing to the crippling of the economy.
Yeah, I mean, the currency, right? Is the currency exchange rate shows you a result, like a report card of the economy. And if you demand more dollars because you want to import, it's essentially giving you a story. It's giving you a report that your local productive base is weak or too expensive. So look at it this way. A bag of rice, you can get rice in Kebbi, or you can get rice in Thailand. Why would I buy Thai rice? Because it's cheaper. So you can go to Thailand, buy their rice, put it on a ship, pay freight and insurance, bring it to Apapa, and it's cheaper than rice that you can get from Kebbi to Lagos. So the problem is not Thailand rice. The problem is that the cost from Kebbi to Lagos is too high. If the cost of rice in Nigeria was half the price of the cost of Thai rice, nobody would import rice from Thailand. So if we keep importing, we keep demanding dollars. If we keep demanding dollars, the value of the naira keeps on crashing. And remember, Cyril, we are spending $4 trillion. Was it 4 trillion naira to import PMS? But PMS is paid for in dollars. So double whammy there. We're chasing dollars with the few naira that we have. The naira keep getting weaker. The dollar keeps getting stronger because we are importing too much.
Right.
We don't need a strong naira. I tell people all the time, if we're an exporting country, then we should be pursuing a weaker naira. So if we sell 1 barrel of oil, we get more naira. If we have a stronger naira, that means we sell 1 barrel of oil, then we get less naira for the same quantity. But the problem is that the local costs are simply too high, so we can't even export. So it's simple to understand, but once we get that understanding, then we can then draft policies to change what we have in front of us.
What would you say about the tastes, preferences. Nigerians, don't always go for foreign-made goods. And the argument is always, oh, I need to spend my money on good quality, but there are products in here, and some have suggested, why don't you shut down, use your local products, and improve on their quality? And that's the way to go.
I mean, still, Nigerians just want value. The wages haven't gone up. So Nigerians have a very, very tight budget. They don't care if it's foreign or local. They just want what is value, what is good at a good price. That's really what they want, right? Listen, look at music. When I was in university, it was only Western music. Now it's all Nigerian music. Now we have local rights, local movies. We wear mostly local clothes, right, and all that. What is the cost? If it's cheaper to import, Nigerians will import. If tomatoes are cheaper to import, rice, maize, all that stuff is cheaper. That's why they import. There will always be the sliver of folks that have the funds to enjoy the good things of like the luxury goods, the Louis Vuitton. That's not the problem. But the baseline of the pyramid, the bottom pyramid, I saw imported gari from India in a store in Abuja. There's imported water, imported drinking water, maybe sparkling, but it's imported, right? So if goods are cheaper in Nigeria, nobody will import. If that's the honest truth. Taking your kid to school outside Nigeria, it's also imports, the same thing. So if schools in Nigeria were good, then no one would take their kids outside Nigeria to study. So the demand for dollars to pay for schools outside Nigeria falls, then the value of naira also goes up. So it's that word, imports, supply. Once we get that relationship right, we're fine.
Production is said to be the best way, so you can produce more, at least, and then you have self-sufficiency, and then you can export. So the big challenge is, how do you increase or improve on production? How do you become a producing country rather than a consuming country that imports just about everything?
We have a model we can copy. The Chinese in the 70s were a very, very poor country. The Nigerians were richer per capita GDP than the Chinese. So what did the Chinese do? They went to their coasts and they built special cities for foreigners to come in there, import their technology, hire Chinese. So they created, like, say, small cities that were like that attracted foreign direct investments. By doing this, developing those cities, then other Chinese cities will say, okay, there's power now in, say, Calabar. So just off Calabar, I will build my own local Nigerian industrial estate using the standards that the Westerners have brought to Calabar. That's how China got developed, from the coasts inward. The foreigners came to the coast. The infrastructure at the coast were world class. The Chinese took the monies, went back to rural areas, and then met themselves in the middle. They invested in rural areas. The foreigners invested in the coast, and then they met themselves in the middle. Nigeria can set up all the coastal cities. You can see they're all going to be EPZ, free trade zones. Attract investment. Forget about current taxes. Attract investments in. Let them come in here. We've got gas. Put gas at a very, very low price. Attract the world to come in here because energy is expensive. If you say, listen, if you come to Nigeria, we're going to sell you gas at a quarter of what you paid right now. Folks will come in, create those cities, allow them import, export, allow them repatriate 100% their taxes. Think long term. Once they're in, they have to employ, they have to rent, they have to buy water. All that stuff is how you get the funds back. What they bring is productivity improvements. Then we copy from them. They bring in the productivity, we copy from them, then it flows into the Nigerian economy. The government alone cannot do it. We can't fix power, roads, airports, only with government taxes. We've got to have a policy to attract investment in, just like the Chinese did. Then productivity will then start to rise, and everyone then benefits.
Where is the place of tax in this? I've heard people say that there are so many areas you could impose taxes on. But again, the citizens would say we are overtaxed, really, and any further taxation would be putting the screws to their neck. So where is taxation in all of this?
Yeah, so taxation, in my view, is a function of trust. The numbers say that Nigeria has got the lowest tax to GDP. I saw someone that said Afghanistan has a higher tax GDP than Nigeria. Do Nigerians pay tax? Yes, but informal taxes. So if you are a car driver in Lagos, or you are a guy that has a store in Anambra, or you drive a truck across state lines, you pay enormous amount of taxes. But do those taxes get to the coffers? It's a different question entirely. The problem with Nigeria is that they don't trust the government. There's a trust deficit. So they feel if they pay taxes, it's not going to be used for what it's intended to be used for. Hence, they don't pay. No one pays tax in Nigeria unless they are forced to pay. The government's role is to show that tax revenues are being used for what they were assessed for. When the people see this, people will pay taxes. People will come out and be like, okay, even if I pay, at least they're going to fix my road. At least they're going to take the trash on the street off the street. So I think it's more of trust deficit. If you get arrested and you're the accountant general of the federation for allegedly stealing a huge amount of money, that trust deficit just keeps on going lower and lower. We have to tax and spend our way out of wherever we find ourselves. But like laugh out the US economist, if you tax low, you get low. If you tax high, you get zero. So both high taxes and low taxes, you get zero. There's a sweet spot in the middle where you tax just enough, but you then show trust. That brings in taxes into the coffers of the federal and state government. Yeah.
One last aspect, just before we wind down this conversation, has to do with managing pensions. You have considerable experience in that. You find a situation where pensioners, now it's always said that you compare Nigeria with other countries of the world, but in this case people tell you that pensions in Nigeria are about the lowest anywhere. And what is responsible for that? Because people spend their lives, and they say this is directly related to corruption, particularly in the civil service. People spend their entire lives in public service, and they retire, and they find that the stipend that accrues to them is not even enough to last 1 week or two. And so there's a tendency to want to save for a rainy day, even if that saving is illegal and unconstitutional.
I understand what you're saying. So just back and understand where Nigeria was before the current pension system. I think Nigeria's GDP, the deficit back then, the pension deficit was about 2.5 trillion, about 25%, I believe, of the GDP back then. We've gone from that to about 13, 14 trillion positive. We have a sector that is, you open an account in your personal name, secured by biometrics, you retire, you go to a private company who pays you. That's for the bulk of the Nigerian occupational market. So kudos to that. It's one of the success stories in Nigeria, and we've been copied. What we have in Nigeria in terms of occupational schemes is the best, I would say, in the world, amongst the best. The problem is, if you go back to Nigeria as a person, you never retire in just one source of retirement income. What we have now is what we call a second pillar. Your employer is paying, you are paying. That's a second pillar. Nigeria doesn't have a social security scheme. So if you are employed, you should be taxed, and that tax goes to a fund that pays social security for you as a base first pillar contribution. So you get that when you retire. This pension with the retirement savings account that we contribute to is like a second pillar where you can pay your own funds in, you can increase your contribution, and you can get more out of it in addition to the basic first pillar that maybe only the government and yourself are taxed to pay. So you have those two pillars. Then you have the third pillar where you can do your own personal scheme, where you can say, I want to have my own personal pension. In America, it's called a Roth IRA or just an IRA, where you can invest in addition to that social security to this RSA. Then you then put that on top. So you normally would have three pillars. We only have this one RSA that is compulsory, and that represents many times the only savings that workers have at the point of retirement. So a worker comes out of working for 20, 30 years. He has no other savings, no house, no assets than that RSA. So the focus is on that RSA. This was going to take me to retire on my annuity for, say, 20 years or 30 years. And that's where the problem comes in, because that's not going to be enough for you. Remember, the PFAs have to invest in Nigeria. What are the returns in Nigeria if you invest in a bond? Less than 10%. What's the inflation rate right now? 19%. So statutorily, you have a systematic return that is not real when compared to inflation. The PFAs have got to be safe. So even though equities are giving you a higher return, you can't put all your money in equities. So this is the problem that we have. Perhaps we could allow PFAs to invest outside America, so we can then hedge a part of your portfolio in dollars. But I think the best thing that we can do is to allow the workers to take a bit of that pension contributions and invest in a home, either in a home that you would live in or a home that you can own, so that when you retire, you can sell that home and you get a lot of cash infusion and you can move to your village or to a cheaper town. So if I'm working in Lagos, I could buy a house, I live in that house, and the house is owned by the PFA through a REIT, and I'm paying my contributions, it's paying the rent, and it's also giving me equity. I work for 25, 30 years, I own that home, I can sell it. That's things we can consider, yeah.
Okay then. All right. Thank you so very much. Kalu Aja, financial education instructor. It's been so interesting talking to you. We hope we'll come to you again and try and understand a little more about money. I should like that. I should like to know about and talk about my money this time. Thank you very much for coming on One-on-One. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
All right. And that's our program today. We thank you for watching. Next week, we'll be back with One-on-One. I'm Cyril Stover. Continue to stay safe.